Sermons of St. Alphonsus Liguori, 7th Sunday after Pentecost, on the education of children. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can an evil tree bring forth good fruit. Matthew 7:18. Then the gospel of this day tells us that a good plant cannot produce bad fruit, and that a bad one cannot produce good fruit. Learn from this, brethren, that a good father brings up good children. But if parents be wicked, how can the children be virtuous? Have you ever, says the Redeemer in the same gospel, seen grapes gathered from thorns or figs from thistles? Do men gather grapes from thorns or figs from thistles? Verse 16. And in like manner it is impossible, or rather very difficult, to find children virtuous, who are brought up by immoral parents. Fathers and mothers, be attentive to this sermon, which is of great importance to the eternal salvation of yourselves and of your children. Be attentive, young men and young women, who have not as yet chosen a state of life. If you wish to marry, learn this day of the obligations which you can contract with regard to the education of your children. Learn also that, if you do not fulfill them, you shall bring yourselves and all your children to damnation. I shall divide this sermon into 2 points. In the first, I will show how important it is to bring up children in habits of virtue, and in the second, I shall show with what care and diligence a parent ought to labor to bring them up well. First point, how very important it is to bring up children in habits of virtue. A father owes 2 obligations to his children. He is bound to provide for their corporal wants and to educate them in habits of virtue. It is not necessary at present to say more on the first obligation than that there are some fathers more cruel than the most ferocious of wild beasts. For these do not forget to nourish their offspring, but certain parents squander away in eating and drinking and gaming all their property, or all the fruits of their industry, and allow their children to die of hunger. But let us come to the education, which is the subject of my discourse. It is certain that a child's future good or ill conduct depends on his being brought up well or ill. Nature itself teaches every parent to attend to the education of his offspring. He who has given them being ought to endeavor to make life useful to them. God gives children to parents not that they may assist with the family, but that they may be brought up in the fear of God, and be directed in the way of eternal salvation. We have, says St. Chrysostom, a great deposit in children. Let us attend to them with great care. Children may not have not been given to parents as a present, for which they may dispose of as they please, but as a trust, for which, if lost through their negligence, they must render an account to God. The Scripture tells us that when a father observes the divine law, both he and his children shall prosper. That it may be well with thee and thy children after thee, when thou shalt do that which is pleasing in the sight of God. Deuteronomy 12:25. The good or ill conduct of a parent may be known by those who have not witnessed it from the life which his children lead. For by the fruit the tree is known. Matthew 12:33. A father, says Ecclesiasticus, who leaves a family when he departs this life is as if he had not died, because his sons remain and exhibit his habits and character. His father is dead, and he is as if he were not dead, for he hath left one behind him that is like himself. Ecclesiasticus 30:4. When we find a son addicted to blasphemies, to obscenities, and to theft, we have reason to suspect that such too was the character of his father. For a man is known by his children. Ecclesiastes 11:30. Hence Origen says that on the day of judgment parents shall have to render an account for all the sins of their children. Omnia quae cumque deliquerent feli a parentibus requirontur. Hence he who teaches his son to live well shall die a happy and tranquil death. He that teaches his son when he died he was not sorrowful, neither was he confounded. Ecclesiasticus 33:5. And he shall save his soul by means of his children, that is, by the virtuous education which he has given them. She shall be saved through childbearing. 1 Timothy 2:15. But on the other hand, a very uneasy and unhappy death shall be the lot of those who have labored only to increase the possessions, or to multiply the honors of their family, or have sought only to lead a life of ease and pleasure, but have not watched over the morals of their children. St. Paul says that such parents are worse than infidels. But if any man have not care of his own, and especially of those of his house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. 1 Timothy 5:8. Were fathers or mothers to lead a life of piety and continual prayer, and to communicate every day, they should be damned if they neglected the care of their children. Would to God that certain parents paid as much attention to their children as they do to their horses. How careful are they to see that their horses are fed and well trained, and they take no pains to make their children attend at catechism, hear mass, or go to confession? We take more care, says St. Chrysostom, of our asses and horses than of the children. If all fathers fulfill their duty of watching over the education of their children, we should have but few crimes and few executions. By the bad education which parents give to their offspring, they cause their children, says St. Chrysostom, to rush into many grievous vices, and thus they deliver them up to the hands of the executioner. Majoribus illos males involvimus et carnificum manibus damus. Hence, in Lacedaemon, a parent, as being the cause of all the irregularities of his children, was justly punished for their crimes with greater severity than the children themselves. Great indeed is the misfortune of the child that has vicious parents, who are incapable of bringing up their children in the fear of God, and who, when they see their children engaged in dangerous friendships and in quarrels, instead of correcting and chastising them, rather take compassion on them and say, "What can be done? They are young, they must take their course." Oh, what wicked maxims! What a cruel education! Do you hope that when your children grow up they shall become saints? Listen to what Solomon says. A young man according to his way, even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Proverbs 22:6. A young man who has contracted a habit of sin will not abandon it even in his old age. His bones, says Job, shall be filled with the vices of his youth, and they shall sleep with him in the dust. Job 20:11. When a young person has lived in evil habits, his bones shall be filled with the vices of his youth, so that he will carry them with him to death, and the impurities, blasphemies, and hatred to which he is accustomed to in his youth shall accompany him to the grave, and shall sleep with him after his bones shall be reduced to dust and ashes. It is very easy, when they are small, to train up children into habits of virtue, but when they have come to manhood, it is equally difficult to correct them if they have learned habits of vice. But let us come to the second point, that is, to the means of bringing up children in the practice of virtue. I entreat you, fathers and mothers, to remember that what I now say to you, for on it depends the eternal salvation of your own souls and of the souls of your children. Second point, on the care and diligence with which parents ought to endeavor to bring up their children in habits of virtue. St. Paul teaches sufficiently, in a few words, in what the proper education of children consists. He says that it consists in discipline and correction, and you, fathers, provoke not your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and correction of the Lord. Ephesians 6:4. Discipline, which is the same as the religious regulation of the morals of children, implies an obligation of educating them in habits of virtue by word and example. First, by words. A good father should often assemble his children and instill into them the holy fear of God. It was in this manner that Tobias brought up his little son. The father taught him from his childhood to fear the Lord and to fly from sin. And from his infancy he taught him to fear God and to abstain from sin. Tobit 1:10. The wise man says that a well-educated son is the support and consolation of his father. Instruct thy son, and he shall refresh thee, and shall give delight to thy soul. Proverbs 29:17. But as a well-instructed son is the delight of his father's soul, so an ignorant child is a source of sorrow to a father's heart, for the ignorance of his obligations as a Christian is always accompanied with a bad life. Centi Pratentis relates that in the year 1248 an ignorant priest was commanded in a certain synod to make a discourse. But while he was greatly agitated by the command, the devil appeared to him and instructed him to say, "The rectors of infernal darkness salute the rectors of parishes, and thank them for their negligence in instructing the people, because from ignorance proceed the misconduct and the damnation of many." The same is true of negligent parents. In the first place, a parent ought to instruct his children in the truths of faith, and particularly in the four principal mysteries. First, that there is but one God, the Creator and Lord of all things. Secondly, that this God is a remunerator, who in the next life shall reward the good with the eternal glory of paradise, and shall punish the wicked with the everlasting torments of hell. Thirdly, the mystery of the Holy Trinity, that is, that in God there are three persons who are only one God, because they have but one essence. Fourthly, the mystery of the incarnation of the divine Word, the Son of God and true God, who became man in the womb of Mary, and suffered and died for our salvation. Should a father or a mother say, "I myself do not know these mysteries," can such an excuse be admitted? That is, can one sin excuse another? If you are ignorant of these mysteries, you are obliged to learn them and afterwards teach them to your children. At least send your children to the catechism. Oh, what a misery to see so many fathers and mothers who are unable to instruct their children in the most necessary truths of faith, and who, instead of sending their sons and daughters to the Christian doctrine on festivals, employ them in messages or other occupations of little moment, and when grown up they know not what is meant by mortal sin, by hell, or eternity. They do not even know the Creed, the Pater Noster, or the Hail Mary, which every Christian is bound to learn under pain of mortal sin.